So the way you know if you need to complete the rent registry form is if you live in the city of Los Angeles and you have a certificate of occupancy from the building and safety, and if your property was built before October 1st, 1978. So if your property falls under these criteria, your property is under the Rent Stabilization Ordinance, or what we call the rent control. So yearly, you receive the bill, you receive also an exemption application, and you receive also the rent registry form. This year is color blue, so be on the lookout when you receive the packet to have this form ready to be able to complete it and mail it in as soon as possible or complete it online. Now, we also included some information here about the fees, the yearly fees. So for the RSO fees per unit is $38.75. And for the SCEP fee, which is the Systematic Code Enforcement Program, the fee is $67.94 per unit. And it explains here that part of these fees can be passed on to the tenants. So half of the $38.75 can be passed on to the tenants, and they have to pay it in a monthly basis for 12 months. So every month they pay $1.61 for the RSO and $2.83 for the SCEP fee. So these fees, the tenants can go ahead and pay them, but you have to give them a 30-day notice. They know that they are responsible to pay these fees. In the packet, as stated before, we include the exemption form. This exemption is used for owners who live in one of the units and want to exempt it, or they have a family member, or if the unit is going to be vacant for an entire year. This exemption form can be used to exempt that unit from the fees. Now, the bill, the exemption application, and rent registry form, we ask for you to turn them in before February 28th to avoid any penalties. Once you complete the fees and also the rent registry form, then you receive the statement of registration, which, as we know that by law, you require to have it in order for you to rent out any units to any tenants. So this certificate allows you to collect any rent from any of your tenants. And this is, some of the reasons why we have the rent registry form in place. It's by law, and it's to enforce, the tracking of rents, and also to prevent from any illegal rent increases to be made. So these are some of the reasons why this law came into place. The rent registry form can be provided to you in two different forms. This one is included with the annual bill. It will have the APN, the address, and the statement number, and the owner's information. This is a blank form. This form can be sent out to anybody who is going to be preparing the form for a owner. So this one is blank. You will have to complete the APN, the property information, address, city and state, and this is how the form looks at the back. So the previous one was the first form. So you have part 1, which is the emergency contact information. On the back of the form, we have part 2, where you're required to provide the information for each of the units of the property. So I have enlarged here what you will be completing for each of the units. The address, if the unit is identified by a letter or a fraction, the number of bedrooms, the moving date, month and year. If you do not know when that person moved in, you can go ahead and bubble in the bubble for I don't know. Also the last rent increase, month and year. And again, if you don't know, then you also can bubble in the I don't know bubble. Next, we have the monthly rent. Some people have Section 8, and as we know, part of the rent is paid by the tenant, and part of the rent is paid by the housing authority. Now, you have to put the total amount paid by the housing authority and the tenants as the monthly rent. If by any chance you have a unit that is only rented out for, let's say, a weekend, a month, then you have to do an estimation of the monthly rent, because this one cannot be zero. You have to put a monthly rent. Now, the only time you will not write anything here as the monthly rent is if you are exempting the unit. If that's the case, you will have to bubble in one of these options. T1 for owner occupied, T3 if there's no rent being collected for an entire year, or if the unit is being occupied by a family member. Also, if you as the owner pay for the utilities, gas and or electricity, make sure to state it on these spaces. Also, another important thing is to provide information about the parking. Do the tenants have parking included with the monthly rent? Yes or no? If you leave any of these slots open, emptied, then the form will be marked incomplete. So you want to go over all the information for each of the units that you have and provide all the required information. Sometimes we've had cases that property might have 30 units, but maybe for 2 they forgot to provide parking information or the number of bedrooms, and everything is marked incomplete. And even though you have paid for the annual fees, you won't be able to receive your certificate because the rent registry form is incomplete. So it's important for you to provide all the information. If you have any questions, feel free to give us a call. We'll be providing the telephone number. And also you can submit an email, inquiring about any issues that you may be experiencing completing this form. So we make ourselves available for any questions or concerns that you might have completing this form, either paper or online. And here is another explanation of this same thing that I was explaining. So all these numbers 1 through 10 need to be filled out, but here I have it more in detailed. Okay, so we said, the unit address needs to be provided, moving date, last rent increase. Now, this one, the temporarily vacant or employee unit, it's this little bubble here. If the unit is temporarily vacant, meaning that it's going to be on vacant for, let's say, maybe 3-5 months, and then you're hoping to renting it out to a tenant, then you go ahead and bubble in this circle here that says temporarily vacant. Or if you have an employee that lives in the unit, it's not paying rent, then you also want to bubble this in. It's not going to be exempted, okay? You're still going to be paying for those fees, but we're going to consider it as a temporarily vacant because you're hoping that in the future, that unit will be vacant by a tenant and you're going to be collecting rent. So we went over this information. Like I said, I will feel more than welcome to share this information with you if you request it. Okay, so let's go on to the next slide. So this is the form again. You can actually complete this form online at register.larent.org. Now, to be able to complete this online, you have to create an account. If you already have an account with the billing section, the same login information can be used to log into the Rent Registry portal. So it will be the same username, which is your email address, and the same password. So you don't have to have different password, different email addresses to sign in. You can use the same one to log in through the Rent Registry or the billing portal. Now, these are the portals, how you will see it logging into either the billing or the rent registry. This is when you are the first-time user. This is the information that is required from you in order to open an account. So you complete this information. Then once you submit it, then you receive an email with a link where you have to go and, not create it, but have the account ready. So you can go ahead and log in and start, paying your bill or complete the rent registry form. Now, once you logged in, the system is going to ask you to add the property. Now, the way you add the property is by having your APN and also that year's statement number. Each year, you're given a different statement number. So when you receive the bill, you notice that you have the APN. The APN never changes, but the one that changes is the statement number. So you make sure that you have that handy with you. So go ahead and add the property APN and statement number, and you have the option to add it as the property owner or the property manager. And this is how the little box looks. So if you're the owner, you add it as the owner or the owner representative. And this is how the page should look like once you log into the Rent Registry portal. This is the same as the paper form. This is step number 1, which is the emergency contact information. It's required for you to fill it out. You as the owner can go ahead and put down your information. This emergency contact will only use it in case there's an emergency at your property. For instance, a tenant calls us because there's a fire at the property, then who should we call to notify of this incident? So we need the telephone number and the address of the person that is very knowledgeable about these properties. So we ask for the owner most of the times to provide this information. So you click on add, provide that information that is requesting, save it, and you're done with step 1. So this is the same information for the emergency contact. First name is required, the first name. Now, last name or relationship to the owner is optional. Every time you see a red asterisk, that means that that's required. If you don't provide that information, if you try to save it, it's not going to let you save it. It's going to tell you that something is incomplete. So you must go back and make sure that every single cell that has a red asterisk has information in it. Now, once you complete the emergency contact information, you have to provide the unit's information. And the way you do it is that right next to your APN, you will see the list of the units that you have at the property. And you're going to click edit for each of the units in order to provide the information. So once you click on edit, you get this cell. In this cell, it's like the step number 2 in the paper form. So you provide the address of the unit. You provide the unit number or letter if it applies to you, the current monthly rent, the number of bedrooms, move-in date, month and year, last rent increase, month and year. And again, we give you the option to bubble in the I don't know option also here if you're uncertain of the move-in date or the last rent increase date. Also, again, if the unit is temporarily vacant or is being used by an employee, you bubble in one of these options. Yes, if it's temporarily vacant or if it's occupied by the employee. Parking included in the monthly rent, yes or no. And also, if you pay for the gas or electricity, you click on the drop-down menu and it gives you the option to click on the gas or electricity. If the unit is exempted, you click down on the drop-down menu to choose the exemption code that applies to that specific unit. Now, the good thing about this is that if you're trying to save it, but if you forgot to maybe provide the number of bedrooms, it will not let you save it. It will let you save it once you provide everything. Now, for properties that have, let's say, maybe 20 units or more, you might want to download the CSV sheet in order to be able to fill out this information in a more comfortable time. Because sometimes it logs you out. So you want to download the CSV sheet, fill it out, and then upload it to the system. And this is how the CSV sheet looks like. Now, if you experience issues completing this sheet, you can always give us a call or send us an email, and we'll be able to assist you with that or guide you on how to complete it. Once you have the CSV sheet, make sure to upload it, and it's going to tell you either if something is missing, if it's incomplete, or if everything has been done. If it accepts it, then you're going to be able to save it and click on continue, and thereafter to submit it. So these are more information on what to do with the information that I just explained. Emergency contact, units information, and the APN and the property information is all here. Once you provided all the information for all the units, for all the properties, because if you have multiple properties, you can go ahead and add them to your account so you can manage all of them at once. But once you provided all the information, you can go ahead and save and continue. And thereafter, you will receive this message asking if you want to continue. If you don't want to continue, if you forgot something, you can always go back. But if you say continue, you have the chance to be able to have a printout of the information that you have provided. Once you get your printout, then you can go ahead and submit it, and you'll be done. Okay? You just click here. This is like your signature. Once you submit it, consider it done. You don't have to worry about it. And then all the responsibility for the Rent Registry form will be completed, and all you have to worry about is the bill. And if you hit it already, then you're done. So this is the information for how to download the certificate, and I know Henry will be going over that in more detailed information. But this is just the billing website address and where to download the certificate once you've completed everything. So this will be the certificate that will be granted to you once the bill is paid and the rent registry is completed. This is some information just for you. This is our hotline for any information, and also to reserve for future workshops. This is a telephone number. Or if you want to sign up for the electronic newsletter, we also have the information for you. And again, this is our telephone number, 213-928-9150 for any inquiries about the rent registry form. And here's also the email address. Now, if you would like to email us because you want a copy of this slideshow, feel free to do so, and we'll go ahead and email you this slide so you can have it at home for a better review. So this is it for me. I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Henry. He'll go ahead and do the presentation for the billing. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mariela. I appreciate it. Okay, folks, so we're going to go ahead and get started with the online portal guide and instructions. We're going to go over 5 specific parts. We're going to go over to what we call Quick Pay, which is a program that's set up in the event that the only thing you're doing is paying 100% of the registration fees. For example, no exempted units, nothing of that nature. That's intended when we have management companies that manage the property and all they're really doing is just making a payment, or you yourself do manage your properties, but you're out of the country, or you just can't get to a computer to make that payment. Someone can do it on your behalf as long as they have basic information. We'll go into that. Then we'll go into property owners that have never registered to the portal for the first time. We'll show you how to make that registration for the first time. We'll also go over how to make a payment, right? If your property is 100% owner occupied, or if you have a combination of both, where you have, for example, you own a duplex, you live in one unit, the second unit is in fact a rental. So we'll show you how to do that. And last but not least, we'll also do 100% exemption, where you may own a duplex, you live in the back unit, but your parents live in the front unit rent-free. So with that, I'm gonna go ahead and get started on sharing a few items, if I may, please. So let me go ahead and get started. Here we go. Marila, let me know if the screen did come up.
Will do. I can see it. Can you just enlarge it a little bit, Henry?
Absolutely. Thank you for that. A little better?
Yes, a lot better. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So one of the things that we always have to reiterate to our constituents, and we want to make sure that you have available, is having your APN number for your property, which is exclusive to your property, and a statement number that is going to reference the bill that you're trying to pay, okay? So when logging on to QuickPay, you basically just go on to our LAHDbill.org website. That'll take you to, like I mentioned, QuickPay. Once you enter the applicable information I mentioned right now, which is in fact that APN and that statement number, it will allow you to go ahead and, so you'll enter it in this part. This is the QuickPay function area. You'll enter the APN number, then you'll enter the statement number. Once you click continue, it's once again going to ask you for the before mentioned information, which is the APN and that statement number. You'll kindly enter that and click continue. It does show if there are any outstanding invoices that are up to 36 months old, it may show more than the current bill that you're trying to pay for, okay? So I always tell property owners, if in fact you're only trying to pay, for example, 2022 fees, make sure that you check off those applicable invoices. A part of what you will see is always a due by date, okay? So this example that we're using were for 2021 fees. So kindly keep that in mind, that you always check the due by date, okay? So once you do that, you're gonna go ahead and click pay. It'll automatically move those invoices to your cart, okay? It'll show you a total that is due in two different areas. If the dollar amount is fine, then we'll go ahead and click pay now. Once again, our website, you're gonna see a couple of times where things are repetitive. Why? Because we wanna make sure that you're in fact paying the correct amount. So once again, it's gonna reflect how much is owed. You'll go ahead and click continue, and it'll take you to a couple of minor things where it gives you the option of how to pay. Do you wanna pay with a credit card or a debit card or an electronic check? One of the things that I always share with people about electronic checks, it's not something that we want to pay with if the bill is due tomorrow, right? Because it does take up to 10 calendar days for that check to be processed, right? One of the things that we also encourage people is to give yourself time when making these payments. One of the things that I have seen is that it does ask you for routing numbers, for account numbers, things of that nature. So please have that information handy so you can go ahead and enter the correct information, and you're not potentially making some type of error that may lead into some type of delinquency being added, or you know, where you're rushing last minute to make your payment. So again, electronic payments, I would encourage you to give yourself more than 10 days if paying that way, okay? So once you enter the applicable information, right, with the credit card billing address, the cardholder information, it'll ask you for the basic information, just like any other provider who you're paying something to will ask. The credit card number, expiration date, CVV numbers, things of that nature. You'll go ahead and kindly click next. And then it's going to give you your information along with the credit card number and email address that you provided, the dollar amount. If everything's fine, go ahead and click finish, okay? From there, you will get an email from the department showing that your payment was processed successfully. One of the things that I always encourage property owners is if you did not get a confirmation, it did not go through. So reach out to the billing and collection section if that happens. We want to make sure that, in fact, we don't assume that a payment is being made, rather that it is paid and you get a confirmation number, okay? I'm going to go on to the next one, which is, I'm a first-time owner. How do I register this property? I want to go ahead and start utilizing the online payment function. So again, you would log on to the HCIDLA.org website or to our LAHDbill.org website. Either of the web addresses will be fine. Sorry about that. I just overheard someone on the phone. So basic information that it's going to ask you for, right? You're going to enter, and let me make this a little bigger so I can make sure that everyone can go ahead and see it. We're going to go ahead and hit first-time registration, okay? You'll enter applicable information that's noted there, such as your name and email address. You have to create your own password. Our department does not have access to your password, okay? So you'll enter that information. Once you do that, a couple of things are going to come up. Make sure you check off, I am not a robot. As funny as it may sound, without that, it's not going to let you move forward. So you'll go ahead and check that off. Click register. Once you do that, an email will be sent from our department to the account that you provided us. Make sure that you open that email. Again, give yourself time when creating an account or doing any of this stuff online. So once you get that email, go ahead and click this area. You'll click where it says click here to activate. That actually activates your account. So from there, you'll go ahead and click log in. Now, your account is not going to note test. This identifies test just because I did it what we call on the test server. We didn't want to obviously potentially affect any live accounts, so we did it on a test server. So again, yours won't have any of that notation there. So once you go ahead and hit your, you enter your user ID and you log in, it's going to ask a couple of crucial items, right? It'll ask you how to add property. So you'll go ahead and add the property information. So again, what it's going to ask you for is that APN number, that statement number, and you will answer a couple of the questions noted here. What is your relationship to the property? If you're on title, then you're obviously going to identify yourself as the owner. If you are a family member of the owner, then you'll still identify yourself as an owner representative. Or if you're a management company, again, you'll identify yourself as an owner representative. Those are the only two choices you'll have. You'll go ahead and click add. So that's for one property. If you basically if you have more than one property that you want to add, you'll continue to click add property as it shows here. Once you add those, again, you'll enter the applicable APN and the applicable statement number. You will need the statement number and APN for each property that you want to add to the account. Okay? So that is how you register your property or properties if it's more than one. I will go to the next part, which is to make that payment online, right? Let me enlarge this a little more, if I may, please. So like I mentioned before, we'll go ahead and go on to the page that we mentioned before, either hcidlabill.org or also LAHDbill.org will also work. You'll log in because you already created an account. You'll go ahead and click My Billing Profile. Okay. So you'll enter the applicable information, and let me bypass this if I may, please. My apologies. Let me go to this part. This is for properties where there are documents that are going to be uploaded. Let me go up to this. My apologies. Sometimes we have documents that need to be uploaded. Okay. This is more or less like a little more in depth with scanning documents to the cloud, right? So it's going to ask you for basic information. Again, your APN, your property address. You're going to enter your email account. Then it's going to show you the grant deed. Now, this happens when, for example, you've owned a property, but you somehow just recently put it into a trust. If it was Henry Marentes that owned it before, now I put it into the Marentes trust, right? Well, the department is not going to recognize that there's a monetary exchange. So it's going to pick up data from whatever I recorded on that grant deed or on that trust deed that are called now, right? So I do have to, I want to inform the department, but now I want to know, how do I do that? This is how we're going to do it. So all the information is going to come up here. You'll enter all your applicable information. You'll enter your billing address along with your name. And if there are any comments, for example, like I mentioned, the scenario where Henry Marentes owned it, but now I just put it into a trust. I'll put a comment there, for example, I've still same ownership, just change it into a trust, same mailing address. So if I have a grant deed that I want to provide to the document, to the department, a document such as, like I mentioned, a recorded grant deed, a trust deed, any escrow or settlement documents or court receivership documents, any document that you may want to send the department, it does give you the option to upload it here, okay? Now, one of the things that's very important, I tell people, if it's not recorded, don't send it over. The department can't officially change anything until, in fact, it's been recorded. The other thing is that sometimes there are court documents that have not been approved yet. It's in the commencement stage because a family member passed. He or she, their property is going to probate, so it does take some time. Don't send us any information if there's no official document that has made that change official, okay? Because unfortunately, we are not allowed to change it just with that. So once you upload it, you'll go ahead and click next. You'll review the information noted there, right? Where it's going to have a drop down of the type of document that you're trying to send us. Make sure you always click on this little square here where you're saying that this is a true and correct document, that this is your information. You're the one that's responsible for whatever you upload there, okay? So you'll go ahead and hit submit my request. So again, anything that you pay or anything that you scan over to us, it's also going to give you a reference number. So once you upload any applicable document, you'll note here that it gives you a reference number. In the event that you want to contact our Building and Collections hotline and you say, okay, well, could you reference number XYZ? That's where it shows that I uploaded my documentation that shows, in fact, that the ownership is no longer owned by me as an individual, rather a trust, okay? Let me go into the next part, if I may, please. Now, the next one is, like I had mentioned before, if you're a property owner that's not really in the rental business, you own that duplex and you live in one. The other one, maybe your co-owner lives in the other, so there's no need for you to pay. However, there is the owner's responsibility to submit his or her exemption to the department, informing us that, in fact, the property is not rented, okay? So this is, again, going with the idea that there's already an account already created. So once you log in, the first thing you want to make sure that you do is you want to request an exemption, okay? Now, if there are more than 1 year that's outstanding, it's going to ask you what year you specifically want to ask for that exemption. Each year will require its own exemption, okay? So please be conscious of that. So let's say that you have 2020, 2021, and 2022 that you do year by year, and then you continue on to the following year, okay? So what type of temporary exemptions can you as a landlord ask for? Two types are the most common ones, where it's owner occupied, our variation code is T1, or no rent is collected, our variation code is T3. Those are the two most common types that we get, and those are the only ones that we consider to be temporary exemptions. Make sure that the unit identifiers are correct, right? So the system will already have unit identifiers in the system just from records that we have from both building and safety, records that we may have received from you folks. So make sure that if it's in fact the owner occupied unit, like in the scenario here, 123, make sure that in fact it's the correct one before you click the next step, right? So in this scenario, 123 is owner occupied, 125 is no rent collected. You'll go ahead and click next. Now, if there aren't any supporting documentation that you have to upload, it will ask for that. For example, if there are 4 or more no rent collected units on any property, it is going to ask you for what we call a certificate of no rent collected document. That does have to be notarized. There are instructions on our portal on what has to be done with those specific documents, okay? Now, there's also what we call a notice of an S5 document. That's when a property is entirely vacant, where the common scenario is the property was purchased, it's a duplex, your intent is to demolish it, you've already relocated those tenants, they've already moved out, you fenced off the building, you secured the building. That is when you go ahead and complete this document. That document, again, also has to be notarized, and it also has to be recorded with the county recorder's office. Okay? So if you have either one of those documents, you'll go ahead and upload those as it shows here. Now, you have to make sure again that you check off on the little box here if you're submitting any exemption. That's just basically you're declaring under penalty of perjury that foregoing is true and accurate. So you'll go ahead and submit your request. That'll go ahead and submit the exemption request for those 2 units that we showed there. Like everything else, it'll also give you a reference number. That'll show that in fact your exemptions went through. A bit of advice, and one of the things that I always encourage our constituents, log on the next day to make sure that your account is at 0 balance, okay? So I'm gonna go on to the last one. So the last one is the type that I mentioned before, where we have the common scenario. You own that duplex, you live in one, you rent out the second. So I'll get into that. Again, this is something where you, the owner, in fact, already have an account. You log into your account. Make sure that you do your exemption first, okay? That's a common mistake that happens with the people that use it for the first time. Then once you start using it more and more, you just become accustomed to it, and it just becomes routine. Now, if the scenario that we use right now where you live in one and you rent out one, make sure you do your exemption first. And let me make this a little more large so I can show you. Again, like I showed you before, you're going to request that exemption. Once you request that exemption and you enter the applicable information, what's going to happen is, and let me get to that part, the dollar amount's going to change. So initially, like on this example, it showed that $395.12 was owed. Once you submitted that exemption, it changed the dollar amount, okay? And one of the things that you're going to see 2 or 3 times, and we apologize that it's repetitive, but again, what we don't want to do is collect money on non-rental units, right? So we always tell property owners, please do your exemptions first. What I don't want is that you, the owner, you see the bill that's $100, you just pay out $100, then you try to request an exemption. Well, the system is no longer going to recognize the ability for you to do a temporary exemption. You made a voluntary payment, so we may run into an issue. We want to avoid that, okay? So let's make sure, like I mentioned before, that we do that temporary exemption first. So once you do that temporary exemption and now the dollar amount has changed, it'll take you to the next steps, which is, this is the part where I was telling you that it's going to ask you 3 or 4 times. Temporary exemptions must be claimed prior to the payment. So it continues to ask you that to avoid overpayment of any account. Okay? So once you make that payment, you'll go into making that payment with a credit card, debit card, or that electronic check that I had mentioned before. Once you've entered that applicable information, you'll go ahead and hit next. Then to complete the payment, you'll hit finish. That is going to also send you an email confirming that the payment went through, but it also takes you to the rent registry part right after that, if you would like to do so. The items that Mariela mentioned earlier, once payment has been made, it actually allows you to click on an area where it says continue with rent registry, okay? That'll take you right over to the items that have already been mentioned by Mariela. So more or less, if you're gonna do both at once, give yourself some time. What we don't wanna do is to potentially have you folks miss something and that RSO certificate that you need doesn't get to you, right? So please, feel free to contact us if you have any questions related to anything billing and collections related. That is something that's not easy to take care of, especially with some of our folks that were accustomed to having our office work with you and guide you on how to complete forms, on how much you should pay. Feel free to reach out to us at any time, and we'll be more than happy to help you however we can, okay? With that, that concludes the presentation of the Billing and Collection Section portal. So we thank you. Now, Elias, can we go ahead and launch the poll for our constituents so they can go ahead and take care of that now? So, like I mentioned before, the poll is more or less something that does help us in being able to provide a better service for you folks. If there's something that we can improve on, please let us know. We do like to hear your feedback, so we would really appreciate a response on this poll. We're going to wait a few minutes while people are answering those questions on the poll. And if there's anyone that wants to go ahead and has not received a response from our chat feature, if there's any question that you may have that's rent registry or billing and collections related, please go ahead and ask that question now if you would like to unmute yourself.
Hi, going back to my previous question regarding the no rent collected, no rent relief collected. I still don't have a COVID declaration from the tenant, not willing to sign any documents. We're going on 9 months, no rent collected. So how do I get an exemption?
Well, the no rent collected are intended for when, in fact, this is not a tenant. This is, for example, an individual. Like the scenario that I like using is my mom is in the front unit. I'm not collecting any rent from mom. That's different than the unfortunate situation that you're in right now. What I would encourage you is to reach out to our rent folks that they can go ahead and answer that a little more. That's something that the billing and collection section, what we do identify is what that temporary exemption is intended for. Not really in the scenario that you brought up right now, ma'am.
Okay. So I call the 213-275-3493.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. My name is Tina.
Hello.
Okay, real quick question. Is there any way you can get an exemption if the tenant has not paid rent in the past 2 years? Like I've evicted the tenant now, so this year I expect to rent it out. But I haven't collected any rent. Can I get credit or an exemption for last year, the tenant not paying any rent, which is kind of similar to the question that was just asked?
Sure. Unfortunately, yes, ma'am. Unfortunately, there's no proration on temporary exemptions themselves. So if you were in the situation where someone was residing in your rental income property, they unfortunately did not pay rent, it's not something that you would qualify for a temporary exemption. Like I mentioned, the most common scenarios are, my mom lives there, she doesn't pay me rent. Or you have a sister or brother that lives there rent free, right? That's what those are intended for. Or the most common one, like I mentioned before, it's owner occupied, right? But with the situation that we're living in, it really doesn't qualify for those temporary exemptions.
Okay.
Thank you for that question.
Okay, and just real quick too, on the SCEP fees and the other fees, you put $1.61 on one, and I think on the other one, $2.63. But when you calculate that, it doesn't come up to half of what you guys are charging right now.
Well, as Mariela mentioned, that's over a 12-month duration.
Right, over 12. Yeah, over 12 months, the $2.63 comes to $30.56. And your fee is what, $70 or something? I don't have
$7.83. Mariela, if you could kindly bring that up again so our constituent can see that. Or if there was a potential typo there, if we can maybe clarify that.
No, the thing is that I think the confusion is that, for instance, for the RSL fee, let me pull that up for you. Just a second, please.
So,
and I'll go ahead and share
so the total that Mariela mentioned, ma'am, it's 1/2 of that fee. So it doesn't equate to 100% coverage of that.
Okay, but I mean, it doesn't even equate to half of those 263 times 12 comes to $30.56. It doesn't come to, if I double that, then that's $60, but you're charging $67.
I'm having Mariela checking the slide right now, ma'am.
Yes, because it's $67.94 per unit. So the $67.94 you divide by 2. So since you're dividing it by 2, one portion the owner pays, one portion the tenant pays. So the portion that the tenant pays divided by 12. And that's how you come up with the $2 and I believe it's 83 cents for the SCEP.
Okay.
And $1.61 for the RSO. I'm trying to pull this up and share with you again. So
okay.
Thank you. But in the meantime, if there is another question, go ahead and ask the question.
Yeah.
Wow.
It made it so much easier when we could bill the tenants, once a year, instead of dividing it up in 12. It makes the landlords seem like we're so petty, adding, whatever the amount is to their rent. It makes our paperwork more confusing, the whole thing. And so many of the landlords are just not doing it. And that is an advantage to the tenant where they're not going to have to pay anything, because most of us just do not want to bother with this. When we were able to charge the tenant once a year, that was so much easier, and that was more equitable, and it was more advantageous to the landlord. I think the city of Los Angeles really is just doesn't care about us as landlords. And then I complained about this last year as well. And I was told, oh, maybe they'll change it back. Well, sure, they did not change it back.
Well, unfortunately, ma'am, that's actually part of the ordinance. So it's a law. I do understand your frustration, ma'am, but like I mentioned before, it is something that was implemented into law already.
Yeah.
Now, there were a multitude different reasons behind that. Those are reasons that are obviously mentioned as part of that amendment to the ordinance.
Well, yeah, if it ain't broke, why fix it? In other words, it was working well, very well all these years, and now they went ahead and made it like this for the last couple of years, which makes it just undoable for most landlords. The other question I have also is, how come in mid-year we had to pay, a supplementary fee for all of this stuff? Did we vote on this? How is it possible for the city to just declare that we need to pay a mid-year again?
Well, that was something, what you referenced, ma'am, was the August supplemental SCEP fee increase of $24.61 per unit. Now, the intent by City Council in 2020 and the Mayor's office was for there to be a increase to the SCEP fee, okay? Then COVID hits, they had to suspend all of that, okay? So before any increase or anything of that nature happens with any part of the city as a whole, there are public discussions, there are discussions with constituents and their council members, right? These are items that are brought before City Council. It's not something that happens overnight. So the time when they discussed the whole increase, that was discussed months, if not a year before. Now, because they froze the increase, it eventually did not make its way over to property owners until August of 2021, ma'am. So that was something that had never happened. That is something that was not intended to be billed, in August. The goal, like I mentioned before, was calendar year 2020, but council offices and the mayor's office decided to put it on hold.
Yeah, it's just the old adage, you can't fight City Hall. In other words, with what landlords had to go through during this whole COVID thing, not being able to raise rents, et cetera, the city should have had a little bit more compassion and not, just, wait until the following, year and that's it. But that's just me. All right.
No, we all the same place.
Yeah.
I have a question too, if I can. I don't know if I need to raise my hand or something, but I'm looking at the
please, go
slide
ahead.
that you posted, and the total amount is more than $3.61, which is what I was told we can charge the tenants monthly. I deal with more than one multifamily and some management companies. So my understanding is, if the building was built after 1978, the rent freeze doesn't apply to them. So, and I know they have code enforcement, but do they also have RSO?
So you kind of brought that up right now, ma'am. So the item that you mentioned was structures that have been issued a permit and or certificate of occupancy after the date that you mentioned, October 1st, 1978, do not typically get billed for an RSO fee. Okay, so if there's any structure of that nature that you manage, like you mentioned, or that you own, I would encourage you to submit what we call a conditional exemption form, so our rent division can go ahead and look at your request to see if in fact that building is excluded from the RSO fee and it was potentially billed in error. But
I did not get billed for it. I'm just trying to understand the rent freeze issues, because the bill is only for code enforcement. So does that mean that rent freeze doesn't apply on that building?
That's correct, ma'am. So if it's not subject to rent control,
okay,
There's nothing behind
So,
it. Yeah.
in the past, before the rent freeze, on multifamily, you would still publish every year what is the maximum allowable for rent increase in the city of Los Angeles. And it will change from year to year. And it apply also for non-rent control. Am I correct?
Again, ma'am, non-rent controlled have no control, so it wouldn't apply. Now, what you're referencing is when the allowable amounts were set, right? But there's no increased allowance right now because of the moratorium. That's why it has not been posted. Once the moratorium is
Okay,
lifted,
so I
then
can go
they
and
will go ahead
tackle
and
them. I can go and tack the maximum that the state allows because the city of Los Angeles have no rules for non-rent control.
I would probably encourage you to contact our rent division first before you do that. Like I mentioned, if there's no rent control, that's you know, I think it's kind of a closed-ended question because there's no rent control.
It is not a closed-ended question because
Hi, Henry.
this
I'm
in
so
Los
sorry.
Angeles City apply to LA rules, apply to LA County rules, and apply to the state of California rules. And that makes it difficult for us, the landlords.
Hi, this is
One of my colleagues, please. Go
yeah.
ahead. I'm sorry.
Sorry. Good afternoon, everyone. I wasn't able to introduce myself earlier because I joined a little later. My name is Emma Garcia, and I work in the rent division. So I would like to try to answer your question, ma'am, and I just want to be sure I have the scenario correct. Your question is essentially for a unit that is not subject to the RSO, whether or not there are any rent regulations or whether or not you can increase the rent currently?
That's part of my question. That's where we are right now. I didn't even ask the whole question. I have more to ask, but I am trying to understand because I am getting billed for code enforcement. So there is some regulation for the building.
Right, but code enforcement is different from regulation of the rent increases. A property could be regulated under SCEP, but not under RSO. That is a possible scenario. So I think what you're asking about is the state law AB 1482, which applies to units, applies to some units that are not subject to the RSO. So for that, we actually do have on our website, and I can provide you the link in the chat room. We have in our website some information on AB 1482 rules, and you can take a look at those, including an FAQ, and you'll be able to determine if your property that's not RSO is subject to the state law rent control rules under AB 1482. So we can start with that. And then, of course, if that doesn't answer your questions, you're always free to give us a call or email us, and we'll try to respond back to your question.
I appreciate your answer. And I do have buildings that are yes on RSO. So they're definitely under rent freeze, but does the freeze apply to also to other fees like electric bills or parking fees? Are those also on a freeze?
Depending on what the other fees are, because there are a variety of other fees and surcharges, what I think might be best is if you reach out to us directly. I'm going to put it in the chat as well. There's a form, essentially an email that you can send to the rent group where we can address your question individually. So generally there are some, and this might not answer your question directly here on this meeting, but there are some fees that can be passed through to the tenant now, or increases that can occur now, but there are some that cannot. It just depends on what type they are. And that's why I say that it would be best for you to reach out to us independently. And that way we can review the specifics of your property.
I will really appreciate it. And if you can post the link in the chat, I will appreciate it. I do want to tell you from past experience, I tried to call you on the phone multiple times and I never had anyone actually answer the phone. So you're not easy to reach.
We do experience high volumes of calls at time, but that's why we make ourselves available via this form that I'm about to here, housing, ask housing. That's a form that you can fill out. Any of you can fill out and direct your question via email to our department. And I'll tell you that we do answer those. Every day I'm answering those and other people are answering those as well.
May I ask a
I will
question?
send a message. I really appreciate this. Thank you.
Can I ask a question about why is the exemption form due at the end of January and everything else is due at the end of February?
That's a good question, ma'am. That's just what's identified under the regulations of the ordinance. And the reason for that is that the bill is allocated a different time period. They don't want to have both come in at once. Now, do we typically honor an exemption that's submitted mid-February? We'll still honor it, but this is something that we encourage our constituents to just get into the habit of submitting it before each applicable deadline.
So if we're trying to do, because sometimes, you know, in the past, I've had problems with paying and doing this whole thing online, and then I say, forget it, I'm just going to do it manually. But if we do it online, okay, and we submit the owner's exemption on a unit,
yes, ma'am.
And you can just send that in, and then you can do the pay and do the rest of it in February.
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely.
So you can just leave the site and just do the rest of it in February. Yeah.
What I encourage people to do is, if you're going to exempt, do both if you online.
There you go. So
like
there again, so then that's exactly my point. So what happens is that we just all end up doing it instead of being due February 28th or when, you know, the end of February, we all end up just doing it in January anyway, which is again,
no,
you know, the city's getting our money a month before they were supposed to.
You can do your exemption first day of January if you would like to do so, ma'am. Has nothing to do with your payment. You can make your payment the last day of February. You can absolutely do that, ma'am. Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. So you can leave the site and then just log in again in the middle of February.
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome, ma'am.
Okay, this is Tina, and I have one quick question. Maybe for Alejandro, maybe Anna could answer it. If you're on the rent registry, if the unit is vacant and you're renting it out, so now you're going to rent it out, you're able to rent it out on at market rent because the tenant was evicted for violation of lease. And then if you look on the last rent deal, you see that the rent was at, say, $11.62, and now you see it's $16.50. How do you let the housing know that the tenant was evicted and that you're charging market rent, because you do have that option now that the tenant has been evicted?
Okay, hi, this is Mariela again. Okay, so you're only required to complete the rent registry form once a year. No, it's up to the owner if you want to be, you know, nice enough to let us know what the situation of the unit is. So if part of the year the unit was temporarily vacant,
it was
and
vacant the whole year. It was vacant the whole
if,
year, but now I have bringing in a new tenant at a different different rent rate. Go ahead.
Okay, so that's fine. So once you complete the 2022 rent registry form, just go ahead and provide the current information for whoever it's living in that unit at the moment. So don't worry about the past, just provide what's happening at the present time.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay, thank you so much, Gabriela. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Okay, answered my question, very clear.
Do we have any other questions from any one of our constituents?
Yes, I do. Just when do the landlords have any say-so over their properties? You know, we can't raise rent. We're getting all these additional bills. We still have to pay utilities. We still have to pay taxes. And I know you folks don't have any control over that. But how do we get any type of consideration, like on the mom and pop, especially the mom and pop units?
We don't.
We don't. Okay. I think ENB is right. We really don't. And I know there's probably nothing that anyone can do about it. We're just like, well.
And you know, Tina, in addition to that, you know, only several years ago did they start requiring this business of telling the city, filling out that whole rent thing, how much rent we're getting from each tenant. Isn't that really an invasion of privacy? I don't understand why the city needs to know all that stuff.
Well, again, ma'am, these are things that I always tell our constituents, and I hear what you folks are absolutely saying, but I always encourage people, if these things have been enacted already. It's things that you could absolutely discuss with your local council office to see if there are answers there, ma'am. But we go off of what's been enacted already. So,
right. What I'm saying
I
is,
apologize that we don't have those answers.
It's just a shame that we as landlords don't get a chance to vote on this kind of stuff. It just gets enacted without our knowledge, and suddenly it's law, you know?
Right. Any other questions from anyone?
No, I think this has been very informative. Unfortunately, like ENB just said, is that we really don't have any control. We're just at the mercy, pay this, pay that. And I've used up all my savings for this past year because the tenant didn't pay rent. He's over almost $40,000 unpaid rent plus attorney fees, and you got to go to court, and they play all those games in court. You can't get the tenant out. So I'm just like, I'm just like 75 years old and owe more people than I care to mention, but I know there's nothing you guys can do. I'm just venting.
Yeah, me too.
No, understandable, ma'am.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Hello.
Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah. My name is Steve. I did a new registry. I built an ADU behind my home in 2021 complete. So I got the form on last week or so. So I exempted the house that I'm living in, and it adjusted the cost. And now I'm hearing that both the SCEP and the RSO has to be paid. Am I hearing that correctly? Because it adjusted my cost for the SCEP portion. I paid that, but now are you saying that the RSO portion has to be paid as well, or is that taken care of and all, and it's up to me to collect the rent from that portion from my tenant?
I don't have the exact figures because of your particular property. You can always reach out to us, but I'll be very generic in saying the following, sir. If you were billed for 2 units, both SCEP and RSO program, you exempted one, the common scenario is that you are still to pay the remaining 1/2 that is remaining. So in other words, if you were billed $100, $50 was excluded because of the temporary exemption, you're still liable for those $50 by the February date of February 28th to be exact.
But just piggybacking, Steve, he just built the ADU, so that's new. That's after 1978. Does he still have to pay an RSO? The reason I'm asking that is because I may be doing the same thing.
It all depends, ma'am. The definition, there are a couple of rules under the RSO that if it's a detached standalone structure, right? The common scenario is the garage, right? Or a recreation room. The landlord converts that non-residential building to a residential, then that would be excluded from the RSO. But if it's an attached structure to that single family dwelling, both may be potentially subject to the RSO, but that's something that our RSO experts will look into a little more in depth, ma'am.
Okay.
Well, thank you for that explanation.
You're welcome, sir. Any other questions? I've got 2 or 3 more questions if we may, please. I did see that the poll was completed, so thank you to those that participated on the poll. We really appreciate it. There's maybe time for another question if anyone else wants to ask a question? Okay, so we would like to thank everyone for participating. We look forward to answering any questions you may have. Feel free to call both hotlines that were mentioned in the chat for both the Rent Registry or for the Billing and Collections section. We hope that you have a good rest of your afternoon. Thank you so much. Take care.
Okay, thank you. Yay,
Thank-
bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
And again, if you need a copy of this slide for the Rent Registry, feel free to give us a call or send us an email, and we'll go ahead and send that to you.
All right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Oh,
Thank
just
you. Have a
one
good
Thank
day.
you.
Oh, go ahead.
on the Rent Registry, do I have to show it as, have to say vacant on the Rent Registry? If I do it
Yes,
now?
if the unit is temporarily vacant, remember there's the little bubble by the rent amount box. You just fill that in as a temporarily vacant. If
Okay,
it has an exemption, then you choose the correct exemption code for that specific unit.
okay, all right, excellent. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.